Have you heard of the Shido people? In the long history, there are various strange legends in China. In history, there was a kind of people. They lent out common rural items like kitchen knives, sickles, to those in need, without charging a penny, and left a prophecy, telling the recipients, and collect the money when the prophecy comes true. This is the mysterious Shidao people. My third uncle is such a person. He was born in the countryside in June 1960. Because of the poor family life, he dropped out of school to do business. When he was 15, my uncle went door to door selling popsicles, with average income, and lived a poor life. Until one day, he met an old man who sold knives, which changed his life. He was an old man who traveled all over the country. No one knew his name. He was dirty, carrying a basket of kitchen knives. Uncle gave the old man only one popsicle, and the old man accepted him as his disciple, and taught him for a year. What the old man taught him, Uncle never told anyone else, and no one knew. After the old man left, third uncle stopped selling popsicles, but instead started selling kitchen knives. He walked around the surrounding villages, and sold knives to everyone. At that time, people in the village who knew Sanshu started the business of giving knives on credit. In the remote countryside, Uncle carried a pole and 2 baskets of kitchen knives, and came to the neighboring KC village. At this time, a woman with a headscarf came over. She said to him, "Selling knives? I'm not selling knives. I'm selling knives on credit. Don't worry about losing money. I'm not afraid of losing. I'm not afraid of losing money in business. Okay, I'll take one." The woman took a kitchen knife and played with it, and felt that the kitchen knife was very good. "I'll give you a word. When this sentence comes true, I'll come to collect the debt," the woman said. Okay, the third uncle asked for the woman's home address, and wrote it down in a ledger. Then he slowly pointed to a place and said, "Wait, when the Erlong River in your village is full of water, I'll come to collect the debt." The Erlong River he mentioned is a big river, which used to have a rapid flow, but it has dried up in recent years. According to the experts, there is no water upstream, so it is impossible for Erlong River to recover. Hearing this, the woman was overjoyed. She immediately went back to the village and told the news to her relatives. People kept coming out of the village. At that time, everyone was poor. A kitchen knife was a valuable thing, so everyone should buy knives from the third uncle. So the third uncle lent out all the knives. He came back with a ledger. When he got home, my grandmother heard about it, almost fainted. 2 baskets of kitchen knives in the countryside were a huge amount of property, so he lent them to the villagers, and it was basically impossible to get it back. My grandma sat on the ground and cried bitterly. "Mom, don't worry. I'll get the money back soon." "How can you get it back? The Erlong River has been dry for several years. It is impossible for the river to rise again. The money will never be recovered." But my third uncle smiled mysteriously, saying that the Erlong River would definitely fill with water. A month later, Uncle San had no knives to sell. He helped the family with the farm work. Grandma complained about him from time to time, and he didn't care. But at this moment, it rained in the mountains. The rain was heavy. It was a torrential downpour. After the rain stopped, my grandpa excitedly shouted that he had heard that the Erlong River was flooded. Grandma was overjoyed. She quickly took my third uncle to KC village. They came to the Erlong River. Sure enough, the once dry Erlong River is now a mighty river. The water had spread to the shore. Grandma stood on the shore, excited. Now she can get the money back. My third uncle nodded. So he started to ask for money from each household. These villagers, seeing the prophecy come true, and gave money very willingly. Uncle took the opportunity to make a fortune. Then, he became famous in the local area. Many people came from afar, and wanted him to tell their fortunes, but he refused all of them. He said he only sold knives, and didn't do fortune telling. Third uncle went to another village. The knives he sold were quickly on credit by villagers. These people didn't believe what the third uncle would say. Uncle didn't explain much. He thought for a moment, and gave a prophecy that was shocking at the time. Rice would cost more than 5 yuan, and the price of meat has exceeded 10 yuan. This prophecy in the rural areas at that time was simply unbelievable, because rice was only a few cents at that time, and meat was only a few yuan. It was impossible for them to rise to 10 yuan. When uncle came back empty-handed, grandma complained for a while. She thought that rice and meat could never rise to this price. Uncle didn't explain much, he just said to wait a few years and see. How many years will it take? Aren't you afraid they won't pay you back? Don't worry, I keep records. They will definitely pay me back. In the following years, the price of rice and meat still didn't rise to the price Uncle San said, but he didn't care. He continued to carry a pole and traveled all over the country. He still only gave credit and not sold, leaving behind prophecies. When the prophecy came true, he would go door to door to collect the money, but a pig butcher refused to pay. Don't think I don't know. You are a liar. You sell a knife for 10 yuan. I think you're crazy about money. Besides, your prophecies have never come true. The butcher was very disdainful and didn't want to pay. Uncle didn't argue. He just said, "It is okay if you don't pay me, but you should discipline your son. He has a hot temper and is prone to trouble. I'll teach my son. I'll teach him." The butcher scolded him a few words. Uncle shook his head and left. The butcher didn't take what the third uncle said seriously, but who knew that in less than half a year, something happened to his son. Because of his temper, his son had a quarrel with several people, and later they fought. His son got into a fight and ended up killing someone. When the butcher heard the news, he fainted directly. When he woke up, he hurried to send the money to uncle, hoping it could save his life. The third uncle sighed and accepted the money, but told him that he had warned him. The butcher's son was grumpy. Something would happen sooner or later, but he just didn't listen. He didn't restrain his temper, which led to such a disaster. Now no one can save him. Later, the butcher's son was sentenced to death. The butcher became depressed and lay in bed and passed away a few days later. In our village, Uncle San is a legendary figure. He usually worships a wooden statue at home, which is an old man. No one knows who this wooden statue is. Every time he went to sell knives, he would offer incense to the wooden statue, until one day after getting drunk, he told the truth. The wooden statue was his ancestor, Guzi, which made the village teacher dumbfounded. Guzi was the most mysterious person in the Warring States period, and no one has seen his true face, even for his own real existence. There are doubts, but he had several disciples we know very well, such as Pang Huan, Sun Bin Zhang Yi, and Su Qin. They could use the world as a chessboard, and the princes as pieces, and manipulated the Warring States history. But it was precisely because of this, which threatened the interests of various princes, so he was suppressed. Everyone agreed that Giguzi cheated the world, which is disgraceful. For the theory of Giguzi, the folk highly respected it. Especially in times of famine and war, the folk would start to spread various proverbs and nursery rhymes. Of course, many proverbs were made up by themselves, to build momentum for themselves. For example, Chen Sheng and Wu Guang's fish with message. And the Shido people are the product of it. They wandered through history, like ghosts in history. No one knows what the third uncle has learned. Some people wanted to be his apprentices, but he refused them all. He said it was useless to learn his skills. In 1994, I was born. Before I was born, my third uncle smiled and told my father that I would become a college student in the future. My father was very happy, but what he said next made him feel incredible. But don't be too proud. There would be many college students in the future. My father didn't believe it. At that time, college students were precious. If a village produced a college student, which could cause a sensation in the entire county, in many people's eyes, to become a college student, it was destined to have a great future. After I was born, my grandmother began to arrange my third uncle's marriage. My third uncle was 34 years old at that time. In the rural area at that time, he was already an old bachelor, but my third uncle refused to get married. He told my grandmother that he had revealed too much, and he was doomed to be unlucky. It was impossible for him to get married. Grandma naturally didn't believe it. She forced a girl to go on a blind date with him, but he didn't refuse. They got married soon, but less than half a year after marriage, his wife ran away. Grandma cried and begged him to find her, but he didn't, but just sighed and carried a pole and continued to be a knife seller. In the following years, my third uncle traveled around and had no fixed place to live. He lent out many knives along the way, leaving only a ledger. He seemed to know when to collect the money, so even if the other party was far away, he could still collect the money. When I was 2 years old, on June 4, 1990, my third uncle came back and brought back a woman. He said this woman was tough. and could live with him. This woman was fair and plump, and my grandma liked her. So my uncle got married. After getting married, third uncle stopped interfering in the matter of debtors, but worked hard to farm. But he had a ledger in his hand. Every time he was short of money, he would collect the debt. No one knows how much he owes. But in the surrounding villages, he was very famous, but he was usually taciturn and never speaks easily. After he got married for several years, still has no children. Grandma was a little anxious, but the third uncle was calm. He told his grandma he was already lucky to have a wife. He would never have a son in this life. Grandma naturally didn't believe it, but he really never had children. Until May 2000, my uncle went to a village to sell knives and was recognized by a man. This man was surnamed Lai Wei, who was proud of himself and married a beautiful woman, and she gave birth to a son for him. But recently, he was getting more and more upset because he always felt that his son looked like his neighbor, but not like himself. But he didn't dare to say it. Out. When he met his third uncle, he knew that his uncle could predict the future. He took his son to his uncle and hoped that the third uncle would tell him whether this son was his own. The third uncle took a look, but remained silent, neither admitted nor denied it. The man began to pester him and also borrowed a knife from him on credit. According to the rules, the third uncle had to speak up, saying that he was just making a living. If you want to know if your son is yours, just do a paternity test. At that time, the third uncle didn't take it seriously, because at that time, the places that could do DNA tests were all in big hospitals. A farmer didn't have enough money to do it, but who could have imagined? When Lai Wei returned home, he sold everything he had to take his son to a big hospital, but it turned out that it wasn't. When the third uncle saw Lai Wei again, Lai Wei ran over covered in blood, holding a sum of money and giving it to his uncle. Uncle's face changed greatly, asking what he had done. Don't ask. This is the money on credit. Uncle wanted to ask more. Li Wei had already run away hurriedly. 3 days later, the tragedy began. When Li Wei returned home, he first threatened his wife with a knife. After learning that she had an affair with her neighbor, he collapsed and killed his wife. Then he killed the man in the neighbor's house. Finally, Li Wei jumped into the river and committed suicide, leaving only a baby boy who needed to be fed. The neighbor's family lost the most important labor force in the family and lived in extreme poverty. There is no winner in this tragedy. After the third uncle knew about it, he sighed. He took the child from the orphanage and brought him home and raised him as his own son. Grandma was a little reluctant, but seeing that the second uncle had no children, she could only accept it. Later, my uncle told me he could tell at a glance that Lai Wei's son had nothing to do with him, but he didn't dare to say it, for fear of destroying a marriage. But who knew that in that year, a farmer really went for a paternity test, which led to such a tragedy. There was an extra son in the family. When the third uncle was busy farming, he worked at home, and in his spare time, he went to mediate in disputes. He never seemed to be afraid of not getting paid. Every time he was alone, he took the ledger to collect money. Basically, he got money every time. Every time my father asked, he wasn't afraid that the money wouldn't be collected. Uncle just smiled and ignored it, as if he was very confident. Back home, he continued to farm and do farm work. The son he adopted was treated as his own, and his wife was also very kind to him. The family was happy. I was already 6 years old at that time. I loved to play at my uncle's house at that time. Every time, he would treat me with milk candy. Because I was naughty, I often played with the puppet box, and I was scolded every time. My uncle told me that was his ancestor. Guji. On June 5, 2001, I went to primary school. My third uncle personally drove a donkey cart to pick me up. The primary school was 20 kilometers away from the village. Uncle looked at the sky and suddenly told me, in the next week, I must not come back no matter what. If I came back, I would be in danger. But I didn't believe it. During the days of staying in primary school, I missed my home very much. But a week passed. All the other students were picked up. Only I was left. I was very puzzled at that time. My third uncle came again, brought me beef buns. When I was eating them with gusto, he told me seriously not to go back to the village for a while, to avoid any accidents. I could only nod in agreement, but it didn't take long. An unprecedented heavy rain turned the whole village into a sea. The local area is mountainous, mudslides occurred, and many houses were submerged by the mudslide. The scene was horrible, and the local village because of the third uncle's incident. The local people fled to the mountains, so they escaped. At that time, this incident even attracted the attention of many people, and even reporters came to interview. But the third uncle's explanation was simple. He said he was an old farmer, and he could tell from the sky it was going to rain heavily. To keep them safe, he asked them to move. The villagers didn't believe him at all, but because of his repeated pleas, they decided to go to the mountain to take shelter. This time Uncle saved the lives of the whole village. After that, his reputation spread. Even a big boss drove over, asking him to help with fortune telling. Uncle never met them, but focused on selling knives. Of course, the third aunt couldn't stand it, and quarreled with him. He is a big boss. If you help him predict which is more profitable than selling knives, why don't you agree? I'm a knife seller, I'm not a fortune teller. And I can't tell fortunes at all. You can't tell fortunes. Why can you talk so eloquently? Anyway, I just can't. Sanshu's stubbornness makes Sansheng very annoyed, but he still seems to stick to the old rules, and never does anything beyond the rules. For this, the couple often quarreled, but Uncle has never told fortunes to others. A disheveled young man came that day. He was covered in dirt, with messy hair, and his eyes were dull. When he saw the third uncle, he begged bitterly, hoping that third uncle could tell his fortune. But the third uncle agreed unexpectedly. He asked his wife to take the child to the inner room, then grabbed the young man's hand to tell his fortune. He told the young man he was young and vigorous. He had gone astray for a while, but if he persisted in his folly, he would only fall into the abyss and be unable to extricate himself. Who knows? As soon as he finished, the young man knelt on the ground and cried. It turned out that the young man was a fugitive. He helped his friend fight, and ended up killing someone. So he fled in a hurry. Before finding Shuzhen, he hadn't eaten for 3 days and nights. Uncle Shuzhen made a bowl of noodles for him, and 3 eggs. After that, he personally took the young man to surrender. The young man held his hand tightly the whole time, bowed his head and said nothing. The young man was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Occasionally the third uncle would visit him. The villagers were curious why he could recognize the murderer at a glance, but he said he didn't recognize him, but felt sorry for the young man. He made a mistake, and lived in fear every day. But no one believed that he didn't recognize him. There are rumors in the village. Uncle San knew physiognomy, and could see a person's face at a glance. But Sanshu never admitted that he didn't before, and never did it again. Uncle left again before the spring festival. This time, he went to the rural area of Shanxi again. There, he left a prophecy that there are roads but no people, and houses in the countryside are empty. As a result, he was almost beaten out by the villagers. Some villagers shouted that the road was for people to walk. Could people not walk on the road? There are so many houses in the countryside. How could there be no one living in them? Could they be left empty? That year was July 24, 2004. Uncle said nothing, but just came back with the ledger. At that time his uncle had built a big tile-jian roofed house. Hearing the third uncle's prophecy, third aunt scoffed at it. Why don't we live in the big tile-jian roofed house? Why would we sleep on the street? Uncle gave a wry smile, and didn't explain much. From that day on, Sanshu seemed to be getting older and older. He also made several prophecies afterwards, but none of them came true. For example, 3 years ago, when he sold knives on credit, he passed by a rural wedding scene. He lent some knives to the kitchen. He thought for a moment, and said a sentence. When a wife costs 180,000, I will come to collect the money. His words. It caused a lot of shock at that time. A woman shouted, "Oh my God. 18,000 whose daughter Jian Yin Jian Law was worth so much money. Isn't it enough to marry a wife for a few thousand yuan? Why do you need so much?" Yes, my son only spent 1,000 yuan to marry. Many villagers didn't believe it, but he didn't explain anything, and left the village with a pole. A few years passed. Although the bride price has risen, it is only a few thousand yuan. It is impossible to rise to 180,000. His predictions failed several times. Some said that the third uncle was old, and some said he was punished for revealing the secret. But no matter what they said, uncle remained silent. But since then, he no longer acts as a prophet. Some people he just collects money from time to time. Most of the time, he was just like the villagers. He works at home during busy farming seasons, and went to the city to work in his spare time. Gradually more and more young people went to work, and the elderly and children in the village increased. Some people began to exclaim that Uncle's prophecy has come true. Now there are roads but no people in the countryside. On August 5, 2010, I was in high school that year, and entered a boarding school. I only had time to go back on weekends. At that time, I often went to see my third uncle. He was always happy. I knew he liked drinking, so I often accompanied him for a few drinks. Does uncle still give credit? No more credit. Why can't you get the money back? Why? Didn't you say that rural people are simple? It has nothing to do with that. Uncle put down his glass, looked at him with red eyes. His voice carried a hint of hero's twilight. It is the world that has changed. I didn't understand, but asked the question I most wanted to ask. What did you learn from that old man? This is also a question that many people want to know. Uncle wasn't a knife seller originally. Because he met that old man, he became a knife seller. He learned some miscellaneous things. Can you teach me? You learn those useless things. Completely useless, Uncle suddenly shouted, with a little unwillingness in his eyes. I don't know why he was unwilling, but he kept drinking in silence afterwards, and ignored me. For a period of time after that, I went to see him every week. For the knife lenders, I was also very curious. Could it be that the knife seller really has supernatural powers? Otherwise, why could he predict the weather, and even save the village from a catastrophe? But the third uncle never answered me, just told me, the knife seller is just a merchant, and he doesn't have that much ability. On say he looked at me with drunken eyes, and suddenly cursed, saying that everyone said I could tell fortunes. If I could really predict the future, I would have bought lottery tickets. I'd be buying lottery tickets. When he said this, his eyes turned red. There are fewer and fewer people in the village. Every time I go to the village, I found that the village was getting more and more desolate. I asked someone. They all went to work in the city. The local bride price has also increased to 180,000. Marrying a wife is a normal thing. Uncle's prophecy came true again, but this time he didn't collect the debt. I was curious at that time, so I asked. Uncle gave me a small notebook impatiently, and asked me to collect the debt for him, saying if I succeeded, he would give me half, because it was in the next village. So I agreed, holding the notebook. I knocked on doors one by one. When they knew I was a credit seller, the older people handed me the money in panic, and even offered to give me more. But some young people didn't believe in this. They sneered at me. You sell a knife for 20, while in the store it is only 2. But this knife, my uncle has been on credit for 8 years. Now the young people were speechless. They gave me the money obediently, but I still didn't receive money from most of them, because they have all moved to the city after walking around. I only received 1/5. I finally understand why my third uncle told me I couldn't collect the money. It is not that everyone is dishonest, but in just 8 years, it has changed like the sea and the mulberry fields. Everything has changed. This year I was 18. I graduated from high school. I finally got into my dream university. Not only that, in the school, I also met a girlfriend. In freshman year, my uncle came to see me, and brought me living expenses. He was old with white hair, and he looked very old. In a small restaurant, I had a meal of dumplings with him. For my third uncle, I have always respected him, and regarded him as a wise man. So I poured out all my college troubles to him. Uncle didn't say much. He just looked at my face, and then told me I should break up with my girlfriend as soon as possible. We were not destined to be together, and we were destined not to be together. I smiled at this, and didn't take it seriously. Not long after, I really broke up with my girlfriend. She was a local, and immediately fell into the arms of a local man. This man owned 5 houses. I was sad for a long time. I put this matter aside, because I majored in economics and management. So the teacher assigned me a homework, was to study the topic of venture capital. At that time, I thought of the knife Jiangrentor. I decided to use my knowledge of economics to explain the ancient folk profession of Shidao people. I wanted to uncover the mystery of the knife Jiangrentor. Soon, I revealed the secret of the knife Jiangrentor. The Shidao people are actually an advanced marketing method. They use prophecy and being mysterious and sell knives at high prices, although they don't charge for the knives. But the price of the knives they sell is relatively high. They can get several times the profit in a few years. First, the knives sold by the knife sellers are several times higher than ordinary people. Second, they never go to areas with a large population flow. To ensure the recovery rate, and rural areas with poor population mobility are the best places. However, nowadays with the rapid social and economic development, the mobility is also very large, so the knife sellers have lost their living space. No wonder after this, never became a knife seller again. So how can they predict the future? In fact, the Sojian called major events in the world all have certain patterns to follow. They traveled all over the country and learn a lot of information from chatting. They are good at sorting out and organizing this information and make many different inferences. And every time they land a knife, they would make a new prediction. There are always 2 or 3 things that come true. In fact, they are also very smart. If they lose the bet, they will only lose a kitchen knife, but if they can win, they will get 10 times, or even more. So in the final analysis, I think the knife lenders are the earliest venture capitalists in China. On May 3, 2019, I went home to visit my relatives, and was going to visit my third uncle. It was still the small mountain village, but it was obviously much more remote. Not only my parents, many of my relatives have moved out of the countryside and moved to the city to live. Now the only relatives left in the village, only my uncle's family remained, driving and looking at the desolate scenery around. I felt a little uncomfortable. Back in the village, I met my third uncle. Uncle was very happy. My third aunt cooked some dishes. I started drinking with my uncle. While drinking, I asked about the situation in the village. Uncle sighed and said, and told me that most of the people in the village had left. Who will farm the land? They all contracted to Li at the village entrance. He plants 100 acres of land alone. I nodded, which made me feel bad. Soon, I and my uncle were drunk and flushed. I began to ask about the whereabouts of his son. He sighed and said helplessly, just like you, all went to the big cities to work, and don't come home for the new year. I nodded, and said nothing. While drunk, I told my uncle about my college thesis. Uncle laughed wildly, and patted my shoulder, saying, haha, you are really smart. All my tricks have been figured out by you. I can't cheat anymore. Then he took out the little notebook again, pointing to the list on it. He said that I didn't recover about 1/3 of the money. I don't know if I lost or gained. Venture capital is like this. There are successes and failures, I said, and third uncle nodded, and continued to drink with me. I drank until I was drunk. I woke up at noon the next day, because the plane was today, so I had to leave immediately. I said goodbye to my uncle. I was leaving, but my third uncle held me back. I see your face is not good. Why don't you take a break? No, I have something to do tomorrow. You look a little pale. You'd better take a rest before leaving. So my third uncle insisted on keeping me. I had no choice but to continue drinking tea with him. At this time, my third uncle proudly told me he advised me to break up with my ex-gen girlfriend, because when he heard her conditions, he knew we had no chance. I nodded. I had to admire his sharp eyes. After a while, third uncle suddenly started to drive me away. Okay, you can go now. I drove for 10 minutes. The car suddenly stopped. Because the road ahead was blocked, a traffic police officer came over and signaled me to stop. I parked the car on the side of the road. I got out of the car and asked what happened ahead. The road ahead was impassable. A big stone suddenly rolled down from the mountain, blocking the road. Fortunately, there were no cars passing by. Otherwise, it would have been a disaster. I just felt a buzzing in my head, and I felt terrible. If my third uncle hadn't insisted on keeping me, I would have been. Could there really be someone in this world and predict good or bad? At this moment, I was stunned. But when I looked behind me, the scene of the village had become blurred. I knew my hometown. I can never go back.